We're in Upper Yengo Creek in Wollombi catchment. We got a call from some landholders who were concerned about some sand sedimentation issues after some bushfires and heavy rains. Sand had moved down the creek and it had spread out across what was essentially a floodplain. This is a really common occurrence, particularly in the Wollombi catchment and some of the other Hunter tributaries, where you've got sandstone topography coming down into a valley that has been historically cleared for agriculture.
It was quite considerable, the amount of rain that came down. There was a lot of peak flows, they call that. The floodwaters had nowhere to go but jump out of the creek onto the floodplains. And in doing that, they dropped all the silt out, and you can see around me sediment both in the channel and out on the floodplain. That's a very natural process that landholders should be aware of, that sometimes their systems are going to fill up and you don't need to come in and scrape it out. One of the issues that the landholders had up here was access to their properties. Now, crossings can be pretty tricky in systems that have peak flows with a lot of sand moving through them because they act as barriers. They slow the floodwaters down and the floodwaters can't carry the sand anymore. So upstream of a crossing, you'll find that they dump all the sediment out. Downstream of a crossing, they'll do the opposite. They'll scour the bed out. So the ideal crossing is a bed level one. So that means that the crossing is put in at the existing level at the bed that you find it. So you drive in, go down to the level of the bed and drive back out. And a very typical erosion process we see out here is bed erosion. So this is when those peak flows put all their energy into the bed of the creek. They can start to chew out the bed of the creek in what is called a head cut. These creek banks are metres high because the bed has dropped out. And once the banks are so high, they're too high to support themselves and they collapse. So one of the solutions to tackling bed erosion and head cuts is to try and build that bed back up again. The advice here, and what may turn into structural works, is that we would probably recommend putting logs back into the system or other types of structures that induce scour into the bed of the creek, get some pools back, so it's not one big flat long reach.
Hunter Local Land Services, we advise on native vegetation on riverbanks and creek banks and how that might be reinstated. Typically that involves fencing off if there are livestock on the property, and revegetating a buffer zone it varies with the size of the creek, but between 10 and 50 metres. The vegetation on the banks and going into the stream on creeks and rivers provides a lot of benefits. Erosion prevention, it stops sediment and nutrient coming down from the land. It provides habitat for aquatic and terrestrial fauna, and it has cooling effects on the river and improves water quality. We want to have essentially sort of messy creeks and rivers. I'm looking forward to coming back to see how this creek recovers after the proposed works and working with the landholders here, but also I encourage any landholders out there to get in contact with us to look at your creek or river, and we can look at some easy options and some fairly simple behaviour changes that you can adopt to really improve this riparian area around the edges of your creeks and rivers.